I feel like parents are so stressed out. When my kids reached the age where they didn't need me as much, my big mistake was not finding things to immerse myself in. If I do not allow myself to become vulnerable, we're not really connecting, and vice versa.
We're not guaranteed tomorrow, but if we are here tomorrow, we owe it to each other.
Yeah.
To take care of ourselves, owe it to our adult children.
I am the only person who could fix what was happening to me. I had to get up. I had to do things. I had to get out. I had to run because that just helped clear my mind.
The best thing I think we can do as parents is to begin to live and invest in our marriage as if the kids have already moved out. Instead of waiting until it's true empty nest and they're gone, why would we want to wait?
Oh my God, we're gonna have so much fun.
That needs to be on there. I hope and pray that is on there. That would be so good. Welcome back to Empty Nest.
Yeah.
That was so good.
Thanps.
I hope that
I'm
was
just here to
recorded.
provide the audience with jokes.
That was
jokes for days.
That was really, really, really good.
I don't even get paid for that. Who knew?
Spring is here.
Spring is here.
That make you happy?
Yes. And you know what? I read a fun fact today about April Fools.
Since we're recording on April Fool's Day.
I mean, nobody might be interested in this, but Pope Gregory the 8th, or maybe the 13th, changed the New Year date from April 1st to January 1st. So people ignored the change and kept celebrating on April 1st, and so they were called fools. This led to the tradition of April Fool's Day. So I wish I had a good April Fool's joke, but I do not. But you have some really fun information.
Thank you for that. Let's just go ahead and jump in.
Let's jump in.
Right.
What are we going to talk about today regarding the fun empty nest phase?
I've had a chance to visit with a lot of other couples, empty nest range couples, and hearing their story, it's like now that we are so far past it, we're nearly a decade past the youngest one leaving. The things we know now would be priceless if we would have known them back then.
So true. So true.
Wouldn't it? So one thing that I was thinking though is the poem by M. Scott Peck, talking about the road not taken.
Oh, because we got our poems mixed up.
Well, that's a poem. We were thinking it might have been Robert Frost's The Road Less Traveled, but it actually is. This is tied to this because that poem talks about you're coming through this path, you come through the woods, and you come to a fork in the road.
Yeah.
And as I was listening to these couples, different times, different places, this theme keeps coming to my mind of we will be faced with a choice. There is going to be a fork in the road. And if we think about it from that poem's perspective, and I get this isn't the poem, this is now my own imagination kicking in. But think about if you and I are walking through the woods and we're on this nice wide path. It's plenty wide for the both of us to walk. It's relatively flat, relatively straight. We come to the fork. And one path looks very similar to the one we've been on for quite a while. If we talk about parents, it's like this has been the path that we are semi-comfortable with over the last decade or more. It's wide, it's relatively open, relatively flat. We can see a long way out there. It looks to be the easier path because it's familiar. But the other path, it's much more narrow. It's not well taken care of. There's debris all over the place. You can't see very far because it takes a turn. And so if you're standing there and you're looking at this, the first thought I would have would not be to take that path, the one that's grown over, because obviously it's not taking a whole lot.
And there's probably ticks.
Maybe snakes. There's going to be challenges. And then this other path, though, it looks so familiar. And then ironically, this last weekend, I got to go on a retreat with a bunch of other men in the Smoky Mountains. And what was amazing is the path that we took that was very challenging to get there. And this is where I kind of this climb ends with a view. These were not the easiest paths to get to. And at the end of them, it was amazing. Now, if I would have stayed on the flat level path, I would not have gotten to see the amazing view that I got to see.
And sometimes I think life forces us onto a certain path. If you think about it, we do have a choice in many situations, but there are situations that life forces you onto a certain path,
Yeah.
Like a bankruptcy forces you onto a path that you may not have, well, I know I would not have chosen on my own, or,
child decisions,
yeah,
uh,
a
life,
death in the family,
death in the
or
family.
I think there's people out there who experience really difficult things. And I feel like the majority of what we talk about, I was saying this even before we started recording, like our experience and what we talk about is between the guardrails of pretty normal. Oh, we don't really have any crazy issues and things that have happened.
So I just got another picture. You ready for this picture?
Tell me what the picture is.
And I've heard this analogy before a lot with business, but if a plane took off from JFK and it was going to fly to LAX, completely across the United States, it's got a self-correcting mechanism on it, so that it never really gets too far off path. But the how often that plane is actually on its exact path to get to where it's going to go, like less than 10%, which means it's constantly correcting. I think
Self-correcting.
If we were to look at ours, we were very quick self-correctors.
Yes.
Because we were constantly asking questions about what do we do now? It's like, when we were coming into empty nest, I would say we weren't fully aware of what to expect, which is why we're doing this, to try to maybe help other couples.
Well, we had just come out of a really, really hard season. We were part of a church that imploded. That was awful, because we had moved there to plant the church. So that was terrible in and of itself. We went through a bankruptcy. That was terrible in and of itself. We had just come off of a season literally of crushing experiences. When you go through seasons in your life and one thing after another thing, and it just feels like everywhere you turn, you're being crushed. Like your grapes, and they always say, like, the bigger the crushing, the better the wine. We had come out of that season. And so our self-awareness in the whole empty nest, we were still healing from some things. And so, we probably weren't as self-aware looking back as I would have liked us to be. But, we could have been. We could have been.
Yep. So if we're going to talk to other couples today, I'm going to come back to the road less taken, they have a choice.
Yeah.
Right. You're right. Sometimes you're forced onto a path. You really don't have that choice. And I know a lot of our comments over some of the recent months, sometimes we look at our children and the choices they're making in their mate, and we can see that this isn't going to be good. We voice our opinion. Ultimately, it is their call. But, then both the child and the parents could be forced onto a path that they didn't call for.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the extremes right now. I'm talking about we come up to the path and we have a choice that we can continue on what we've been doing. Mm-hmm. It looks somewhat familiar, may not be awesome, but it's comfortable. Or we can get on this other path. And one thing that I've always talked about, even with the boys, is when you have to fight for your victory, it means so much more. Does that make sense? Like if you're supposed to win the game by 20 and you do, okay, you're going to celebrate, but it doesn't mean as much as when you were supposed to lose by 10 and you win by 1. There's something about having to fight for the victory.
And everybody loves an underdog.
They do.
A good underdog story.
They do. So
today I'm just curious, like, who do you feel like our target audience is? Like, who are you talking to? Are you talking about people who are in the midst of raising their kids and they know empty nest is looming on the horizon? Or are you talking mainly to people who have walked through the empty nest and are trying to figure out why their family isn't looking like they thought it was going to look? Like, who do you think, like, in your mind, who are you feeling this is going to have the most nuggets of wisdom for?
It's going to be valuable to anybody, whether they have kids or no kids. But I think if it were the avatar, the ideal person for this message, it's going to be parents with kids still at home.
Yeah.
And, today I got to speak to a bunch of interns, and all these are young adults. They're 18 to 24 years old, but almost all of them still live at home. So they are grown adults.
Yeah.
but they're still living at home. And that created some interesting conversations today about, honoring your parents because you still live at the house. And it was a good conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that would be the audience, is to the parents that still have children at home, even if they're 24 or 25 years old.
Yep.
That'd be my guess.
Okay. Good deal.
All right. So if we're going to stick to this claim that going through the climb creates a view that's worthwhile, if we take that framework and we tie that to marriage, what paths do you think we would see in a marriage that, okay, we have two choices here, either right at empty nest, or maybe we still have children here. What can we do to fight for the marriage to make sure that the climb is worth the view? That makes sense.
Well, you have to make a decision, first of all, to fight for the marriage, because some people decide not to. And again, we're not talking in extremes. I'm not talking about an abusive situation. I'm talking about just normal married people. We don't really know each other because we've invested all of our time into the children. And what do? We have to make a choice. Is it worth sticking it out? Is it worth getting some therapy? Is it worth talking through things? Do I love you enough? Do you love me enough to stay in the fight? Or are we just going to cite, well, we have irreconcilable differences. We don't love each other anymore. I deserve love, that kind of thing. And we'll just divorce. So I think the decision,
happy.
Yes, the decision first and foremost has got to be made. That's, to me, is the major fork in the road.
So when I was doing just some reading, looking up for some ideas, the couples that are on this path and they choose the well-worn path in that Road Less Taken story, if they were to choose that, what they inevitably found is that they miss the chaos of having children at home. They miss the busyness. They're on the path and it's like they're longing for the way that things used to be. Yeah. But now they're beginning to get well on down this road and realize, what are we doing? And that's when loneliness begins to kick in. The experience is a lot of times, if it's the traditional household where the husband is working, he throws himself even more into work, which now leaves, in this case, when I did that, left you home alone even more. And it's like work was a good distraction for me. But you found yourself even more depressed because you're now lonely. Not only are the boys gone, I'm gone, and you're just surviving.
Yeah.
So that is the path that it's like, I look at a lot of couples, it's like, what can we do to get off of that? Let's say that we've taken that path for a while. Let's say the kids are still at home. The best thing I think we can do as parents is to begin to live and invest in our marriage as if the kids have already moved out. Mm-hmm. Instead of waiting until it's true empty nest and they're gone. Mm-hmm. Why would we want to wait? Why don't we go ahead and start implementing a weekly or biweekly date night?
Well, I think that's why it's so important when your kids reach a certain age. And as a mom, like I'm speaking to moms like me, because I stayed at home. We raised kids. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was blessed to be able to do that, but it's hard because that's your whole life and that's your whole identity. When my kids reached the age where they didn't need me as much, my big mistake was not finding things to immerse myself in, not finding other things to do that were outside the purview of just being a mom and, cooking, because we always had a house full of kids. We always had people around. So when kids left, all of that left. And then, you kind of find yourself wondering, what am I going to do with my time? So that was not a fun place to be.
Okay. So if we're going to jump off of that nice wide path that's well worn, that obviously that's what most people have done. And the reason I even say that is statistics show that that's what most people do. Mm-hmm. They continue on that path. The 40% spike in divorce rate. We know that how many don't get a divorce, they just stay together out of convenience. So, I don't know, what is the ratio of couples that are now either in or moving into empty nest and they're just on that road
Mm-hmm.
that's widely taken and wide. But what happens when we jump over to the other? Well, we know one, even from a physiological perspective, physical exertion does some wonderful things to the body. Exercise. What would happen if we started doing some exercise, even if we were just walking? The date nights. Another thing that they talked a lot about as far as what was incredibly healthy is to start a new hobby. People think, well, golf, that's not hard. Golf is crazy hard, right? So what would happen if, you and I were to start a new hobby pickleball? It forces you to learn new things. And every time you engage your mind into learning something new, especially if we're doing it together, I would say we are on that more narrow path because it's littered with debris and stuff and tick. I'll kick the snakes out of the way for you.
I don't care about the snakes. I don't like the spiders.
Or the ticks.
Or the ticks. That's right. But yeah.
But think about that as a marriage. What can we do? Get off of this nice, wide, seemingly easy path and get over to the one that requires us to do something totally different.
And I don't think it's just about the doing things, because I think you can lose yourself in doing and not really connect.
Almost use it as a mask.
You can. And I think the real issue is, why are we doing these things? Is it just to fill our time with more stuff? Or is it to connect? Because if you don't really connect, like if you don't know, if I don't open up to you how I'm feeling and what I'm going through, even if it's hard, if I do not allow myself to become vulnerable, well, we're not really connecting, and vice versa. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that vulnerability is a lot easier for women than it is men. Sometimes I feel like you're a deep well and I got to pull stuff out. And you don't like stuff pulled out of you always. So it has to be a good timing. It can't be at the busiest time of your month where you've got so many other plates spinning. So I feel like I have to be wise in thinking, okay, when is a good time to have us sit down and talk about something that I'm feeling or that we're dealing with? But I do think that people miss connection. Not stuff, not doing things, not busyness, but connection, because that's what's going to keep a marriage afloat. Because at this point in our lives, we've got 37 years under our belt. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in training another husband. And I know that sounds crass.
Yeah, because that means you've trained the one you have.
Well, I've tried. I have tried. Mm-hmm. And haven't you trained me? Okay. That's what we do, is you navigate and you become accustomed to the person. And so I think that
I will agree with you on being intentional for the connection.
Yeah.
What I think I'm just throwing out there.
You're going to disagree.
No. It's for me to be able to, I think, feel more comfortable with you. I feel like we do have to connect, and as shallow as this may sound, doing something together helps me feel more connected to you.
I agree. It does.
Just sitting down at a table or sitting on the couch to talk is that may be ideal for you, and we have to do the give and take for each other.
Well, I'm not talking about one. I guess I'm talking about we need to have both. One at the exclusion of the other, it really is not going to be super fruitful. And I think that's where it comes into knowing your spouse. Because I like to do stuff too. We both like to do things.
But you do draw the line on things you're willing to do.
Sometimes I do. Yep. Yes, I do. But so do you. And
yeah, haven't had a mani-pedi, and you haven't gone fly fishing.
Those are two totally, completely different things.
You could go fly fishing with me.
I could, but when's the last time you went fly fishing? I'll wait.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. All I'm saying is, if you think about it, we, as empty nesters, we have choices. What choices did we make? Do you remember what choices did we make in the midst of all of this that helped us get up? I remember just me, maybe not together, but I had to make a choice. I am the only person who could fix what was happening to me. What I was feeling, I could blame it on the kids leaving. I could blame it on, life just sucks. But I had to figure out for me, what do I need to do for me? I can't sit on the couch all day and watch reruns of whatever show, and just be BFFs with Jack, our dog. I just can't do that. Like, this is getting me nowhere because it's sinking me and spiraling me deeper and deeper. And so I had to decide, for not just for me, but the trickle down effect for my family. I had to get up. I had to do things. I had to get out. I had to run because I used to run a lot. And that just helped clear my mind. It was like a majorly wonderful stress relief for me. I got involved at our church with, we had this thing in our church in Memphis called Generous House. So I volunteered it was like a food pantry, clothing boutique for people who literally had nothing. That was their only access to clean clothes and food many times for the week or the month. So there were things that I had to decide, am I going to show up and do these things so I get myself out of the house? I had to take care of me. I had some hormonal work to do. So I made those choices. I'm sure you made choices too, because you had a wife that was flailing and, I'm sure you didn't know what to do with me half the time. So
we were going through a stage that we didn't understand. We were learning on the fly. And that's why we were talking earlier. I think we did a lot to self-correct, which is why I brought that flight pattern in. We did a lot of self-correct, a lot of questions. My basic personality is to do a lot of self-reflecting, reflect at the end of each business week. What went well? What could I have done better? What am I going to do next week? And those are just like 3 basic questions that were business related. But even as a couple, those are 3 things we could do. How was last week? That's where our first Friday came in. Every first Friday of every month, we had a set routine, and it was a way to connect, get on the same page with, when the kids were young, or, we still do it now. We're empty nest, but we still do our first Fridays. But the self-reflection, asking key questions, are we satisfied with the marriage? Can we get stronger? And I know that's a contention, it can always be better, but we don't like that phrase, do we?
Well, here's another thing that I just thought of, because we are very different people. You are very disciplined. You have daily disciplines built into your morning, probably your afternoon, your evenings. And I, at times in my life, feel like being so hyper disciplined feels like a straitjacket to me. Because I would rather live in the moment. I don't want to be all like locked into like, oh my gosh, I got to do this because it's part of whatever my routine is. It's not that I don't have routines, but that's probably a mindset of mine that has been faulty. But I'm a little freer than you are. And so I'm just thinking back too, because we both made choices. We had to, we prayed a lot. I had to get in and see, Lord, what do you, when I'm depressed, what does your word say? What do I need to dig into that can help me break out of this? And I am a true believer that God's word is active. It's alive. If you eat it as medicine, it literally heals you. And I don't care what kind of flack I get over that. That is one of my core beliefs. And so that helped me so much. But yeah, we had to decide to get over ourselves. I had to decide to get over myself and work some things into our lives.
Yeah. You were talking about, you had to do something for you, the health. And that's one of the other topics that I felt like we could talk about is we could continue to do what we've always done, stay on that same path. Wasn't it Einstein that says to continue to do what we've always done and expect something different or different results is the definition of insanity.
Yeah, maybe.
So if we were to look at our own personal health, we're in upper 50s at this point. We're closer to 60 than 58 even. So what are some things that we can think about getting off that nice wide path to take care of ourselves? And I know this is a touchy, important topic to you, is why is our health at this age so important?
It's not touchy. I think my health is very important to me, but when things happen that you cannot pinpoint how to remedy them, which is why I even mentioned a while ago, ladies, you have to take care of your hormones, because at the time that you're going through empty nest, most people are premenopause, perimenopause, going through menopause, or you're postmenopause. And those are some really choppy waters to deal with. And so, yeah, the whole, like, I could concentrate on my health and I could hit the pavement and I could run, because I always say I always ran to support my eating habits because I'm surrounded by all these boys who, you guys eat a lot and you didn't always eat healthy things. And so that caught up with me eventually. And so I had to dig deeper into why are things not working the way they used to work. So I do value health. Mm-hmm. I value, supplementing and things, but yeah, I think that's very important, because you can't be healthy here if you're physically not healthy. Well, I guess some people can.
Not your best.
Maybe not your best. Yeah. I know people who are chronically ill and they have a really good outlook, but I think that, we are made up of body, soul, spirit, and all of them have to work together to be your best. Mm-hmm. So my kids want me to be healthy. They want you to be healthy.
Yeah, I went and worked out with our oldest the other night, and one of the comments he made in the middle, he goes, you got to keep this up, because you got to be ready when Kate walks down the aisle.
Oh, well, we might have to end there, because I might have to cry. That's going to be sad. Happy, but sad. Yeah.
But yeah, our health for each other. Yeah. We're not guaranteed tomorrow, but if we are here tomorrow, we owe it to each other.
Yeah.
To take care of ourselves, owe it to our adult children.
Yeah.
I mean, we've visited with a lot of people our age, and they're struggling with their parents.
Yeah.
Because their parents aren't in great health. So we take care of it for ourselves, and the byproduct of it, we've taken care of it for our kids.
Yeah.
Our grandkids, make sure that we're here. So
yeah.
Being intentional, like you said, even it's like if you don't feel like you have the time for it, it's just not a priority.
Yeah.
Get out and walk. You don't have to have a membership. You might not be close to a place, but the health is so vitally important, and it's not really complicated.
Yeah, I agree.
So what about adult children? Thinking about the path that we've been on for the last 20 years with our kids, it's going to change. And if we don't think it is, then we are definitely looking into some rocky waters or rough waters. And so what do you think there are some things that we had to intentionally do to both release our boys once they moved out and invest in that relationship later? Can you think of anything?
I do. I can. I think that we had to make the decision to not be offended, because there's always opportunity to be offended. Something's going to happen. We're going to read into something too deeply. We're going to take something the wrong way. We're going to make assumptions, and assumptions are killer if you aren't communicating. So we had to choose not to be offended. And I think too, choosing not to be offended is also choosing humility, because there's many times that I believe that parents, and I'm going to say this based upon a lot of comments that we see, whether it's on TikTok or on Instagram, on the shorts. I'm just going to say this, you can't get the full meaning of something from a 2-minute short. You can't. You can think that you do. You can make that assumption, and that's okay. You're free to comment and do whatever, but I just am here to tell you that I see a lot of people comment, and they put their own personal issues on there, and it's heartbreaking. It is sad, because there's many people I'm just like, oh, that really makes me sad that's what's happening to you right now. Mm-hmm. However, I think when parents make the decision, now, again, I'm not talking extremes here. If we make the decision to humble ourselves and to offer the first step toward reconciliation, offer the first step of maybe clearing something up, an issue that's happened, or even sometimes the big elephant in the room, heck, sometimes it's not even an elephant in the room. Sometimes it's a dead body. And you're like having to step over the dead body, and nobody wants to say anything, and it gets stinkier and stinkier. And sometimes there's big issues like that someone needs to have I guess the guts to say, okay, let's talk about this. I am so sorry for what I've done and how I've said things that have caused you to be very hurt. How can I make this right? I think if we bring humility and we have this stalwart refusal to be offended, then it's how do you mess that up?
Yeah.
And then you got to be okay if things take a little bit to get ironed out.
Yeah. And I know I asked the question about adult kids, but I really do believe that it starts in the upper teens.
Yeah.
With those types of conversations, because
Yeah.
I came across a card that I got from our youngest. He was still living at home, but he accused me of taking his phone charger. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do. Peyton?
Yeah.
I do.
Accused me of taking his phone charger. I knew I didn't. Anyway, it was like, in my mind, I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'll buy you another one. Or you've got a job, go buy you another one. But then 2 days later, he found it in his truck. And he sent me this card, and he's like, I am so sorry. But he also commented, he said, what a valuable lesson to value relationship over being right. And that was as a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
But it's like, that was really what you're talking about, falling on the sword. It's like, there's some things it's not worth fighting over.
Yeah.
Not worth arguing over. But I guess I'm believing if we can begin to implement those types of relationships with our upper teens,
Yeah.
that begins to make it easier so that when they're moving out, we've already begun to release some of that control that or perceived control. We've talked about that before. We don't have as much control as we think we do.
No, we don't.
Life has a way of dictating certain things. But I was just thinking about, when we deal with our kids, being humble, saying, I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
falling on the sword and really deciding, what relationship trumps being right at times.
Well, and here's another thought I just had, especially with teenagers at home, because, when you've raised kids and you have adult kids, even if you're in the throes of raising kids and you've got teenagers, and we all know how special teenagers are, because teenagers a lot of times know everything and parents know very little.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like in order to maximize the years that you have with your teenagers and really cultivate relationship, I feel like you really need to take an audit of what are the stressors in your life, because I feel like parents are so stressed out. We were stressed out too, but I feel like the longer we live on this planet, it feels like people are just ratcheted into the matrix of stress. And I don't know, I feel like if we had really done an audit of what can we eliminate from our lives that's really unnecessary, that will help us to be more present with our kids. And a lot of times teenagers don't want to just sit at home and be with parents, and that's okay. Like our kids just didn't sit at home with us all the time, but there were a lot of other kids with them a lot of the times. But what do we need to eliminate from our lives to be present, to not be quite so stressed that we can really sit in those moments, or have the wherewithal and the clearness of mind to defuse a teenager when they've lost their car charger or their phone charger. You can't be stressed to the max and think of things like that. Most people can't. And so I think taking an audit, like, how do I become less stressed? Do I really need to play on that basketball league for the third night of the week? Do I really need to go and play poker with my friends this night every week, or whatever it might be? I don't know. What can we do to relieve our schedule of some stress?
I did take Taylor with me to play those ball games.
You did. Yes, that was an inside joke.
Well, now it's public. But anyway.
Yeah, it is. Well, and that's just.
I think a lot of it too. The phrase keeps from it's a matter of, are we willing to be inconvenienced?
Yeah.
If we go back to are we willing to fight for the relationship? Are we willing to be inconvenienced to have a better relationship? Because parenting, it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
Marriage, it can be inconvenient. I mean, they're both incredibly rewarding, but are we willing to be inconvenienced to plant seeds for a better relationship later?
It's hard. It's hard to make those tough decisions, but it's also hard to have broken relationships and you yourself be broken. And, everybody in the family knows you need to do some work on you, but yeah, that's your hard. Like you choose, we all get to choose.
Yeah. Steve Harvey, right? Choose
Is
your
that
hard.
Steve Harvey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a whole
whole
lesson on choose your hard.
Yeah.
All right. What about grandkids? As
grandkids.
It's fun. Like you spent 4 days watching them. I mean, that was inconvenient on you. You'll do it again tomorrow. I know you would, but
I would.
Being willing to be inconvenienced.
Well, I remember when I got home, because we passed each other, because as I was getting home, you were going to your retreat in the Smoky Mountains. And I was like, there's a reason that God closes the womb at a certain age. And I'm not raising kids at my age, but there's also grandparents out there who are raising their grandchildren. And I have such respect for them and what they've chosen to do. But yeah, it's a blessing. I love it. But it wears you out a little bit because you're on all the time. And it reminds me of what it was like to have, little boys running around. So, yeah.
So if we look at this, we are fortunate that our grandkids are close by.
Yeah.
There are grandparents that aren't. What would you maybe suggest for grandparents that are not close by, that they could figure out how to the best of their ability, be a part of the grandkids' lives?
Well, I will say this. I think today with technology, it makes it easier than it was, because my mom is 84 and she lives with us. And, she's got 3 great grandbabies. 2 of them are here. One is in Missouri. She's got another one on the way there. And then one on the way in Colorado. But during 2020, like Kate was born in 2019. And when everything shut down in 2020, my sister lives in Missouri. My mom was in Arizona. I was here. And so we would set up Zoom like meetings, and we would literally, when I was with Kate, we would just watch her. Like sometimes we never even said a word to each other, but like we asked each other, is this normal to just sit and watch this sweet little thing play? And so delighted in her. But she saw them. And so I feel like today's technological, like with FaceTime, it gives you access, and it gives children even a way to be familiar with a grandparent's face, a great grandparent, or, aunts, uncles, whatever it might be. So learn how to use technology. If you don't have an iPhone that you can do FaceTime, whatever you think about iPhones, I mean, boy, it is worth it to have an iPhone instead of an Android. Sorry, but there are some perks. Number 2, budget, figure out a way. I remember telling you, wherever we live, whatever we do when our kids start having babies, we have to have the money set aside to travel.
You said it much nicer for this. You told me I had to make enough money so you could fly out to wherever they were whenever you wanted.
Yep.
Okay.
I did. I didn't say it mean-wise. Like, it's not like I had this whip and you might have felt like it, but I think we all make choices. We all make choices. And if you want to get to your kids bad enough, you're going to do it. Period. You're going to do it. So that may seem harsh, because there's probably people out there that are like, well, I don't have that choice. No, you do.
Feel like they don't have the money or the health.
We all make choices. What do we then look through your budget? What do you spend money on? What is important to you? Like, show me your checking account and I'm going to show you. And I'm talking about that for me too. Yeah. Like, it's very obvious what's important to me if you look through, how we spend money. So all you have to do is curb some things, maybe eat at home more instead of eating out. I don't know what it may be. Again, we're not talking extremes. I'm not talking about somebody who is, a grandparent who's cancer ridden and can't travel, period, because they're so ill. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about because I know I'm going to hear about this from
those
people
that actually have choices.
That have choices. Yeah. Yes. We all make choices. And I think that's why it's so important. It's not a manipulative way to have good relationship with your kids. But, I think one of the most beautiful things about having children and having great relationships is having access and being able to walk alongside grandbabies, because that is one of the greatest joys of my life. I love being able to come alongside and how can I help? How can I make your job a little easier? I think of what did I need when our boys were little? Like your parents, my parents both worked. It's not that your parents didn't work, but your mom kind of like lived the life that I did. She stayed at home. And if she was closer, she would have been at our house in a heartbeat. What did I need at the time that our babies were little? I would have loved to have somebody close by that could have said, hey, go take a couple hours, go have a bubble bath. Let me come over. I'll stay with babes. I'll feed them dinner and put them to bed or whatever. Just if you're local, think of things like that you can do. And I think that there are statistics that show, I don't have them offhand, so this is like unscientific because I'm just saying this with my mouth.
No, I've seen them, so I can vouch for you.
Yeah, thank you. That makes me feel better. That grandparents live longer the more time that they're around grandbabies. And I believe that grandbabies who have access to their grandparents, like our grandbabies are so blessed because Lindsay's mom and dad live literally 10 minutes from us. So all four of their grandbabies or grandparents are here. Yep. And they say that just goes into raising a more well-rounded child. And I believe it. I do. So unscientific, unverifiable or not, I believe it.
No, there's a lot of studies around that supports it. So no, you're right. You just didn't cite your source. So
I don't have a source. My source is right here.
Yeah.
And here.
So the grandkids, I mean, it's one of those things, again, I keep coming back to even the hike that we did this last weekend. When you're willing to climb, the view is worth it.
Yeah.
When you're willing to, fight for your time with the grandkids. I mean, when you walk in and they recognize and run for you, and that's just, there's not much feeling like that.
Well, and I'm going to say this because I know that there's always people that might be listening who, I don't know, maybe you're sitting in a place where your relationship with your kids is not great. Therefore, your relationship and your access to grandbabies is not great.
Limited.
It's limited. Maybe it's non-existent. I realize that the things that we're suggesting, it's not that they don't work, but I also think that if you have extenuating circumstances, you have to know that not everything turns around in 2 hours like a Hallmark movie does. I think you have to do the right thing and know that it could take time to play out. It could take time to get to the point where the relationship is open again. Because in all truth, like I'm looking back to when we were raising our kids, the gateway to our kids was through us, like it or not. If we had a falling out or somebody was just toxic or something happened and we just could not have relationship, well, you're not going to have access to my children either. And that's not a manipulation. That's being wise as a parent. And I'm not saying that all parents out there are toxic if you have a bad relationship with your kids. What I am saying is, if it's important enough to you, you will do the work, you'll do the right thing, and you'll be patient. Even though I know it's hard, I think it's important to know that regardless, you're still the parent. And I think setting the example for your kids by being humble, by being willing to offer apologies and even guidance on how can I best serve the relationship here? Because clearly what I've done in the past hasn't been working, or it's caused this divide in our relationship. And it very well could be not just you, but there could be, guilt on the party of your child too. But you can only control you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to do what's right, to do the right thing with the end goal in mind. And knowing that relationship it's the cherry on top. It's what we're all striving for. How do we maximize our relationship? How do we make it the healthiest that it can be with our grown children, with the same effort you would put into your marriage relationship? How do I put that same effort into relationship with my grown children? And then put that same effort into the relationship I have with my grandchildren. Because I think, grandbabies grow up. And if I have a history of being controlling and snippy and I'm always going to bring up something that you're not doing right. Like if that's my history with my children, then that's probably going to be how I'm going to treat my grandchildren as they grow up, So I think that you have to take a good hard look in the mirror. I had to look at myself and I had to decide, what am I doing that's causing my kids to not want to spend time with us, And it wasn't always easy to see, but everything's fixable. I just have to be able to look at it.
Everything is fixable.
Yeah.
Let's save this last one because it could be the most tumultuous, the most powder keggish of the group.
I love a good powder keg.
I know.
Or a good grenade thrown into the middle of the room. Let's do it.
In-laws.
Ooh, that is a big grenade.
If we're going to fight for the climb to have that amazing view,
yep.
At this point we've got daughters-in-law that we do have great relationships with, but we're never going to replace the parents. Never would we try, but they have basically taken your sons off your hands. And some parents, it doesn't matter how amazing this young lady or young man, it doesn't matter. There are some parents that feel like no one's going to be good enough for their kid.
Yeah.
And how do you have a good relationship with your adult child if you don't ever view the daughter-in-law or son-in-law as good enough? That's one side of it. And there are others that this new son-in-law or daughter-in-law could honestly not be good for your kids, but it's not your call, right? We've had that discussion. What would you say or how would you recommend parents to do their best to build an amazing relationship with their son-in-law or daughter-in-law?
I think that if I had a son who was already married to a young woman that, maybe wasn't my favorite person, that's, first of all, if this woman is not dangerous, or let's flip it, if we had a daughter and there was a husband, if they aren't dangerous, if they're not harming your child, you have to figure out, is this a preference or is this an obvious red flag? Because I think you got to know when to keep your mouth shut, and when to open it. And the time to open your mouth is probably not after they've already been married, unless there is abuse like that, is taking place. I think we get so hung up on our preferences, and our preferences become the overlying arch, and it clouds everything. I believe that you just need to, like you've said it before, you got to get over yourself. If there's not an abuse, sometimes I know there've been situations even, in our own life, in our extended family where, you know, a mom stepped in and had a conversation, before the daughter got married, and the daughter didn't listen, and then it ended up kind of a train wreck. And sometimes that happens.
Sometimes it does.
But for the most part, like I think it takes time to mine the gold out of somebody, because there's always gold, again, in most people. If this is not like, you don't have a psychopathic, narcissistic serial killer that your child is married to. So figure out, how do I mine the gold? How do I appreciate this person for what he or she brings to the life of my child? And I think too, recognizing like the women that our sons have married make them really happy. And that's what you want. You want,
important.
Yeah. If they are happy, that's how do I throw a flag on the field on that? Nobody knows the future. Sometimes you can maybe anticipate an issue coming, but I just think that you got to figure out, how can I come alongside and champion you as a person?
Do you remember when we had the Weedmans on?
Mm-hmm.
They joined us on a podcast
Yep.
a while back. I really like Cherry's
Cherry.
answer. Do you
Yeah.
remember it? You want to?
Not enough to quote her, but I do remember.
Paraphrasing it, she said the way she would handle it was she would voice her concern, but end it with, "But I trust you, and if this is who you love, I will love her as well."
Yeah.
And it's like she had some concerns. Is this the best? But I just thought, what a beautiful way to frame it from, here are my concerns, but I trust you as an adult. I've raised you to be discerning.
And this was before they got married.
Right. I believe so.
Yeah.
But if this is the path you're going to take, I will love her too.
Yeah.
I mean, what humility on that. And looked in at some of our comments that, there's some that won't agree with that, and that's okay. But I'm thinking, if I wanted to alienate a relationship with my son, it would be to dig my heels in and say, this isn't the best option for you. What is the likelihood that I'm going to have good quality relationship with my son?
Yeah.
When I've made it clear I'm not a fan of his choice, and then I'm going to be surprised that I don't have a good relationship with my son.
Yeah.
So I loved her answer on that. And I think there's one, it's a lot of wisdom in that. There's maturity in that.
Yeah.
There's an awareness of relationships matter. So I really liked her answer on that.
Well, and here's the thing, because we have raised sons and we have daughters-in-law. I'm abdicating my role, my almost matriarchal role, if you will, to come alongside these women and offer whatever I'm supposed to offer into their lives. I didn't give birth to them, but I can love them just as if I did. And there's something in every mother-in-law, I feel like, that is yours to impart to the women that your sons marry. Just like if we'd had daughters, and like I'm thinking of, we have some really, really good friends, Lori and Billy. Well, their son-in-law, like, he thinks Billy hung the moon. Like Billy knows his role in his son-in-law's life, and they have a great relationship because he hasn't abdicated his role to come alongside this man and, be another father figure to him, even though he has his own father. So if I don't have relationship with my son and his wife, how in the world am I going to be able to come alongside? And let's say if my kids are having marital issues. Now, granted, there's a fine line here, because not all kids are going to feel comfortable airing all of their dirty marital laundry to their parents or their in-laws. And I get that. Some things need to be private, but if you're in crisis, sometimes you need someone that your only agenda, like our only agenda for our kids, is to help them be better and stronger and do what we can to help them move forward. So if one of them came to us in crisis because they're having marital issues and they just don't know what to do, say we get a call at 2:00 in the morning. If there's friction there between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, we're not going to be much help to them because first of all, they probably wouldn't make that call in the first place, but I don't ever want to abdicate my responsibility as an older generation, like a mother and a father, to help, to come alongside, to offer whatever encouragement. Because sometimes people just need to know this is normal. You're going to feel this way. Marriage is not about always feeling in love. Marriage is about growing you. The Bible talks about iron sharpening iron. You definitely in a marriage, you sharpen each other if you will allow it. And I think that sometimes they just need to know that you're going to run up against this. You might bump up against this issue and there's nothing wrong with you. It's okay. You can make it through this because there's validation that happens. And I don't ever want to give that up. So I think that's a good place to be when you've got that relationship that you can come alongside.
Well, you touched on this phrase, but it's a phrase we've used a lot. Without relationship, you have no influence. And to the extent that we've maintained relationship with our sons, created and now maintaining relationships with our daughters-in-law, we have the relationship, which now means we have a voice, we have influence, and don't want to take advantage of that in a manipulative way. But it has been very intentional, inconvenient. One of them lives an hour away, but if we get an invite, we'll figure out how to go.
Yeah.
It's important to be willing to be inconvenienced to build those types of relationships because, man, think of the view. Again, I keep coming back to that. You don't get the most beautiful view by staying in the house on the couch. We get to go spend time with our grandkids. What a view.
Yeah.
With our sons and daughter-in-laws, it's so good.
Yeah.
Anything else on any of those topics? Because you touched on something that I want to dig into just a little bit.
What?
You said, you mentioned the time of 2 a.m. Why did you pick that time? I'm curious. Any reason? Or just flowed?
I probably just flow, but I think we had our own 2 a.m. issue a long time ago.
Yeah.
Where you hit the hole in the wall.
Yeah. Yep, I did. And that's, we often think that when arguments happen, I think maybe it's just me, arguments happen amongst marriages in the early years. What happens though when we're dealing with, or we have a couple that's now dealing with empty nest? The relationship isn't as strong as what it was when they first got married. They've allowed the chaos of life, the busyness of life, the hecticness of schedules, but they've become more roommates instead of marriage partners. And what happens now if there is an argument or a fight as an empty nest couple? My challenge to the men is, who is your 2 a.m. friend?
Mm. Who's your 2 a.m. friend?
I've got a couple. The two that we're closest with, Brett, Billy. I could probably throw Aaron in there. And I think there's a lot of others that would say, you know what, you can call me. There were a few men at this retreat this last weekend. Some of the guys were talking about it. The guy says, I just don't have any friends that I trust.
Mm.
And the leader of the group said, you can call me. I mean, there was a heaviness at the table.
Yeah.
Because there were some vulnerable times. You spend 3.5 days with guys out, doing hikes and out in the nature and having cigars, watching March Madness. It's almost like that immersion effect. When you immerse yourself in a new country, you learn the language so much faster. You immersed yourself with, in this case, 12 other guys. There were 13 of us. And we went hiking. we grilled out. We just ate tons of food. March Madness, cigars, and it was like the walls begin to come down when you begin to spend a lot of time with. And one of the discussions was around, do you have a 2 a.m. friend? And not everybody does.
Yeah.
How do you get that? You have to be willing to be inconvenienced.
Well, you have to also be willing to be vulnerable. Like, you don't build 2 a.m. friends by just once in a while seeing them in a church and saying, hey, have a good week. You build a 2 a.m. friend over time, over being vulnerable. You have to, I don't suggest, like, the first time you go to dinner with people, like, let all your walls down and it all comes out.
But yet you did that over and over.
What? I know. I've done that one time with friends but it wasn't the first time we went to dinner.
Oh, yeah.
No, it was not. I will push back on this because you are wrong. I knew her was the first time to dinner with him. We had built a relationship.
Wrong.
Are you talking about Tracy?
Nope.
Oh.
So, Jake, back in my recruiting days when I was at Allstate, I had had at least 4 interviews and lunches with this guy named Rod Lovelace. And we ended up going to lunch with him because my final interview with them was I wanted the spouse to be involved so they would know what is this marriage, what are they getting into? Because starting a new insurance agency was hard work. And our very first lunch meeting, when Allison and his wife were there, Rod and I overheard them talking about stretch marks from the baby. And
Okay, no, that's just women talk.
oh no, that's personal.
Yeah, but women, I can know after the first time I meet somebody, I can know all about their birth story. There is just like you guys have a bro code, women speak in terms of birthing, like, situations, and because that's how we bond. I'm talking about like a deeper vulnerability, like, when you let your guard down and you show someone the good, the bad, the ugly, and they have every opportunity to just, like,
walk away
silently
and
turn and yes, and we never really talk about this again. I'm talking about the 2 a.m. friends process takes time. And if you never let your walls down, if you had never been vulnerable with those guys, those 3 guys that you've named, and they didn't know really much about your life, like, you remain plastic, not real, then I would venture to say you don't really have a 2 a.m. friend. Like, that takes time. And not everybody is going to be a 2 a.m. friend. I think you might have a handful of people that will be like that for you.
And, got some, involved in some men's groups, got some really close friends. I got a wonderful text from a guy this morning that was very, very, very encouraging. So you build those up over time. And it's like the first 2 that I named were 6 years in. One guy that I could still call now, the very first guy that crawled over my walls, that was over 30 years ago. I know I could call him.
Yeah.
What was interesting though in this retreat, they just had that discussion, and it was kind of eye opening. All these men that were there, they were quite successful on the business side. Only a couple of them weren't married, but it was very eye opening that it is not all that common to have that 2 a.m. friend. And I love the way Aaron, he always talks about it. If it's beyond, you can call me at 2 a.m. and I will come over. That the way he defines it is he knows my patterns or my goals, my tendencies so well that if I'm supposed to go walking the neighborhood at 7 a.m. of a morning and he knows that I'm not physically able, he's going to come over and help me walk it. It's like, it doesn't have to be that there's a fight or an argument at 2 a.m. They've got to come give you support. How well do they know you to help you even accomplish some of the basic stuff that you said were important to you?
And I think it's important to note too that you also have to be willing to be that 2 a.m. friend to somebody.
Absolutely.
Like, because a lot of people are takers and they don't always give back. And I think that, you know, there's got to be that give and take to where, you know, how well do we know our friends? Do we know them well enough that, you know, because I know I've got one friend that, like, when she goes in, when they're going through a hard time or whatever, she goes a little more silent. They're pretty private. And so there've been a couple times that I've, you know, reached out. I want to respect how someone walks through a crisis or a difficulty, but I also don't want to leave them there. If, you know, if it's been a while, like, I think there's a give and a take, and it's just as important to be that 2 a.m. friend as it is to have a 2 a.m. friend. So
to, I guess, bring this to a close, based upon that poem, The Road Not Taken, we have a choice in everyday life on whether we're going to take the road that's not taken. It's got to be worked on. It's got to be cleared. It's going to be something we know it's going to take a lot of extra work. And I just think about our marriage after 37.5 years. It never gets to the point where it doesn't deem needing worked on. It's never going to be a time that it's not worth us investing in. I've told people before, 37 years, you'd think that there would not be any more intense moments of fellowship.
you'd think we could just ride with
How's that?
ride, you know, but no.
But it doesn't happen that way. So, just want to encourage people that it's worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Having a great marriage, it's worth fighting for. Having a great relationship with your kids, it's worth fighting for. Great relationship with your grandkids, worth fighting for. All these things are worth being inconvenienced. When I say fighting for, it's like taking that narrow path with debris all over it. It's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
The return on it, that investment, is priceless.
And when you clear that path, it's going to be clear for your kids and then your grandkids and their kids. So we're talking legacy.
Yeah.
The long game. So, yeah.
There we go. I was like, I've never seen her say the long game without.
I'm trying to not use my hands to talk as much. I'm trying, because when I watch these back, it can be kind of distracting to me. Maybe it's just because it's me and I'm like hypercritical, but sometimes I'm like, girl, you need to sit on your hands because it is bad. So anyway.
All right. Anything else? Any questions?
I think we're done.
You good? Yeah.
I want to remind people to like and comment, share with people.
Comment even if you disagree. We can take it.
We can.
All right.
We can. Have fun. Thanks.
Welch out.
Welch out.